think we're good to
I
go.
think we're okay, no worries. Okay. Good evening. I'm Mike Smith. This is March 19th, 2019. This is the Goffstown Budget Committee meeting. And we'll first off start off by welcoming back all the members who've been on it. Congratulations to those who've been reelected. And welcome Bill Cordes, Spencer Diaz as new members on the team. Welcome Tim Stetson as now our school committee member. And we'll welcome Kelly Boyer as our select board member. With that, let me do a roll call. Carl, if you could start us, please.
Carl Soderquist. Bill Cordes.
Cole Reel.
Richard Manzo.
Spencer Dias.
Timothy Stetson, School Board Rep.
Susanna Buzzell.
Mike Smith.
Peter Grigorikakis.
Eileen McNinney.
Jeff O'Brien.
Joe Alexander.
Kelly Boyer, Selectmen's Rep.
Thank you. At this point, in public comment, I know we have members from the school committee and school board, so I think we'll get to them later unless you had something you wanted to say now. Hearing no, we will keep moving. We have minutes from the public hearing and after the public hearing. I don't know if everybody's seen those or if we need to resend those and do them at the next meeting for approval. How's everybody on that? Have you already seen them and gone through?
I didn't look them over.
You did not?
No.
Yeah,
I wouldn't mind
I
if we
think-
delayed.
I'd suggest we delay that, and I'll have Catherine send them out again in anticipation of the next meeting, if that's all right with everybody. We come to election of the chairman. I'm willing to continue and interested in it. If there are others that would want to be a part of that.
I'll nominate Michael Smith for chairman of the second.
I'll second that, definitely.
Everyone's like, not me!
Are there any other nominations? Okay, if not, thank you.
Do we have to actually
We
vote?
have to vote.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Looks like unanimous, thank you. Cole, you served us well as vice chairman last year. Are you interested in
I'd be
continuing?
willing to continue serving as vice
Okay,
chairman.
then please do, that would be great.
Thank you.
Tonight, I just wanted to get us through, a few housekeeping things, probably reviews for a lot of us, but also for the new folks. We had rules of order that we have used for the last couple of years. Let me see if I've got some, if you don't have them. You should have received them with the, if anybody not received them or needs a copy tonight, we're okay. These are ones we've been working with for a couple of years now, and they seem to be handling things well. I just wanted to get those out on the table, and if anybody had adjustments you wanted to make to them or edits.
Wait, you have extra paper copies?
I do.
You have extra ones, I'll put it in my file.
So I don't know if anybody had any that you saw that you wanted to see different. If not, I'm going to suggest we continue to operate by these, and it puts us in a good place if we have things coming up in the future. Okay. The health and dental insurance is available. You have to pay for it, the total cost of it, but you could be part of the town's health or dental insurance. And I did get a copy, if anybody's interested in this, I got a copy of what the rates are. I just got those this morning, so I don't know if, are there anybody here that's interested in using this for your health or dental
How much is
benefits?
it? That's what I want to know.
Does it
See
go
if
up
you
or
get a
down for
good
1
deal.
month?
Sounds not fair, but
We'll see.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, do we need to vote on the rules, officially vote in the rules of order for the committee?
We can do that. Can I
I'll make a motion
make a
to
motion?
approve the rules of order as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so if you do decide you want to look into this for the town health and insurance plan, you stop by Town Hall, and Catherine will be able to help you get signed up and go through whatever processes are needed. We also sent out some of the pertinent RSAs so that you'll have those to look at. I think they talk about this as 32 and 91A3. These talk about what our duties and responsibilities are, and I think the other part of that is more making sure that we have all of our, anything that we're doing totally transparent and open meetings, and you'll notice we're going to be filmed in all of our meetings. And we just make sure that if we have a quorum of us together at a gathering, you don't want to do that outside of a meeting, or post it and say, we're going to have a meeting, and we can get people together. But there's a RSA in there to let you know where that falls. So that's important. And then so if you end up with questions, please let us know and we'll get the answers. But the general rule there is we want everything out in the open, and everything is televised and open to the public.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Yes.
I just want to add on with the 91A things that if there is a new member that's unsure, that means replying all to emails constitutes a 91A issue, so don't reply all to emails.
Right. Yeah, and I think you'll see in one of these documents, we talk about if you want to send something out to people with some facts, it's best that you send it to myself, and we'll have it distributed to everybody, so we don't do things that's not transparent for everybody. So we'll want to, yeah, rather than a reply all. You're right, Joe, thank you, that's a good point. Okay. I want to thank you for all coming here, because we wanted to spend some time hearing from the school department about some issues that are coming up here in the high school regarding the flooring, and we will get to them in just a moment. A couple more issues here. Every year, the Municipal Association puts on a training program, and it typically happens in September. And we'll get the word out to you on the date as soon as we get it. And whoever would like to go, the town will support the price of admission. And it's a one-day training session. It is good. I tend to go regularly enough to see what the new things are that have happened, and it's a good refresher course, as well as a good intro course for anybody that's new to the job. We're going to want to talk about process improvement and ideas that folks have for what we can do better this coming year. I guess I just wanted to raise it with folks tonight to start thinking about it, and maybe on our next meeting we can start bringing ideas forward. I think one of the things I want to pursue as at least an idea is having us, as a budget committee, be at the select board meetings when the directors of the town are presenting. And I'm thinking it might save some work for the directors. It might get us into the job earlier, and then we would have them come back, instead of coming in and doing a presentation and then a few weeks later come back in and have us go through line by line. We can listen to the whole presentation, and then we can be working in parallel with the select board. Last year it got pretty lengthy before we got the real budget, and I want to get that done earlier this year. So we got a lot of bases to touch on that, but if that sounds encouraging to people as an idea, then at least I'll get some more detail of what we would have to do.
I have a couple questions about that, actually. Could that be done as potential joint meeting nights where we
Yes.
know that, like, we'll have a quorum, so we know we'll have like a bridged meeting at the end of that period, and that
That's-
way,
That would be the thought, Peter.
Okay.
Yeah, this would be a combined budget committee and select board meeting.
yeah, they're not necessarily, we're not doing any work with what they're
We're
presenting
going
at
to
that
listen to the
moment, but-
presentation. That's
Yeah.
what my thought would be, and then we'll have our session with each of the directors, and go line by line.
Yeah.
So that's what- Scully, I know I didn't broach this with you yet, so I'm sorry, but.
No, that's okay. I think it's a great idea. If it's possible to work it in the schedule, we get the schedule far enough advance. I think that
Yeah.
it would be really beneficial for, especially for the department heads,
Yeah.
it being more efficient for them.
Yeah, and save them another.
I
round.
like that idea a lot, and then it gives more room for the budget committee to work on questions and more up-to-date information as budget
Yeah.
season kind of rolls
Mhm.
through. The question that I did have, thanks for bringing that idea up, I like it a lot. Has there been any more discussion about looking at the monthly expenditures?
We're trying to do that on a monthly basis now.
Yeah, doing that more consistently?
The end of the
Okay,
town
great.
one, we won't get until March, because we just got a
Mhm.
budget for the town, so we will be sending those out as we get them. Catherine sends them out to you, you should be receiving those.
The only problem I have with the joint meetings is that it could appear to voters that we aren't being an independent body of the select board. And I think it's really, really important, because we do have a different voice than the select board, that we keep our meetings completely separate.
Yeah.
So that the select board has their rep on our committee
Right.
to have that voice. But if I fear that we are going to lose our influence among the select board, and I think it's important we stay separate.
I think, my understanding of what you were saying is you guys would come and listen to the department heads present.
Right,
So I don't even think it would be possible to have a joint meeting with the selectmen, but if I'm understanding correctly, you guys would watch the pressions and then meet afterwards, separate from.
separately
Right.
from them.
From the selectmen,
Yeah.
And I guess
Yeah.
maybe the issue is, it's a good issue you're bringing up, because we don't even want the perception that way, but maybe communicating that as part of when those meetings are together, that we're here to just listen and save the town directors another stop, and then you'll see in the future budget meetings that we are gonna be doing those separate, and we're gonna go line by line ourselves, and the select board will be going line by line themselves, and at the end of that, we'll see where we land. But I guess that was a thought, Joe. I know you're right.
I mean,
That-
one
that
could
be a
also say
pothole.
that
You're right.
based on just the questioning of the select board members would in fact influence members of the budget committee. Or vice versa, questions of the budget committee during a presentation could affect decisions of the select board. So I'm very afraid of putting even public hearings together, presentations together with the select board. I think it's really important we stay independent, because the budget committee checks the school board and the select board.
Well, what if the presentation were given to selectmen and the committee together, and then selectmen are free to ask their questions? We're free to have our meeting separately, so there's no conversation between the two, it's truly just a pure presentation.
I almost look at it as like, if we go back to college or school, like, you're going to lecture, and now we're gonna go over to lab.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
this is lecture is joint lecture. We're all sitting in the same room, hearing the information, right? Just hearing the presentation. In a couple of ways it could be done. It could be the select board's meeting, and we just post that we're going to have our meeting in the room across the hall immediately afterwards. That we go off and have our meeting.
and the selectmen go have theirs.
Yeah. And we may not be doing anything with that information that night. We're just getting the information so that we can just be
Yeah,
more
so
efficient when it's
just-
time to grind it out.
Basically listening, I guess,
Yeah.
might be the,
If we want to be more efficient with the department heads, which I do understand that's a problem, why don't we have both the meetings in the same night, but they do need to be separate of each other? So if the department head is there, they have to give two different presentations to both committees, because I really see this to be a big issue, especially amongst voters.
So you're specifically saying they should be presenting to each committee or each board separately?
Presenting independent of each other. They can present twice in one night in the same building, in the same room, but different times. in different hearings.
So we would stagger them, like, one select board would start
Right.
with police, and we would start with fire, that's what you mean? And they would switch off the
I
roles.
can see it in part what he's saying.
Fortunately, it's like 8 months away, so we have plenty of
Yeah, we
time.
got
So we can
Yeah,
figure it
trying to
out.
work
Yeah.
it
Just
out.
something to think about.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good points.
They're broadcasted though, too, right?
Yeah.
And we would just clone Brian and Scott.
Mike, if I could, it seems like your point was to try to cut down on redundancy in watching the select board meetings. A lot of the times the presentations are pretty much the exact same, and they just have to give it to us at 2 different times. It's something we can look to, and I would love it if Selectwoman Boyer would bring it up to Chairman Georgantis to see if something like that has been done in the past, or just general thoughts about historic context of that, if that's ever been conceptualized before.
I'll do that on Monday.
Thank you.
We'll have a bit of homework to do to try
Yeah.
and get a process in place, but thank you, that's good
Good idea to
suggestion.
have, yeah.
Chairman, if we're bringing up suggestions,
Sure.
it's a very simple suggestion, but I think that when we're in the meat of the meetings in, November, December, something that I noticed as we were going along, we'd have those long nights, and let's just assume that we're gonna have a couple of those long nights this year too. I almost want to have mandatory breaks on those nights.
Let's do it.
No, because I noticed there is a moment where it's like
Just keep
I don't
going.
want to say any departments or whatever, but there may be particular departments that got kind of grinded out a little bit harder than others because it hits 9 o'clock and we're like, okay, I've been sitting at this table way too long.
Good idea.
So maybe, we just say, hey, if it's going to go longer,
Sure.
everybody's going to walk away, close your eyes for a second, come back to the table.
Good thought. Yeah, I agree. Okay. I don't know if anybody has any other ideas at the moment. If not, we'll pursue these more in depth for our next session.
I want to thank Scott Gross for all the hard work he did on the budget and the way it was presented. It helped make everything really very clear. So thank you.
Very much agree. Yeah,
Yes.
we appreciate it. I guess what I've got left is updates from the school department and the town, but why don't we, maybe this is a good time to take a tour, and would that work for everybody?
Yeah.
Do you want to open it up with some discussion,
Yeah.
Scott and Brian, and however you'd
Sure.
like to deal with it?
In terms of the microphone, Taylor, I'm sorry, Brody, can you hear me or? You want me to move a little bit
This
closer?
There's one here for you, Scott.
Can I hold it?
No.
I can't.
Do you want to just grab a chair?
You know my affinity for microphones, right?
Yes, I know you're.
All right. So the reason why I spoke to Mike is regarding the high school, the flooring here. So in case some of you don't know, I started as the business administrator in July of this year, and on my first day, the superintendent took me around for a tour of all the schools, and I walked around all the schools, and I noticed that there were some issues with some of the flooring in a couple of classrooms. Didn't seem all that bad. I would have described some of the worst rooms in, say, fair condition, but not in horrible condition. Walked again in probably December, noticed that it got worse, and then most recently, walked it about a month ago, and I'm like, what is going on in some of these classrooms? You're gonna see some of these classrooms. So essentially, we've seen a steady deterioration in some classrooms, many classrooms here, on the 300 and 400 wings, as well as some of the landings and the hallways, to the point where it's getting worse and worse. And you'll see that when Randy and Dawn, and Randy is our facilities director, Dawn is our facilities supervisor, and they're going to give you a tour of these classrooms. So the reason why we're here tonight is that the problem is getting much, much worse, and we don't think that waiting another year and 3 months is a viable solution. We need to do this during the summertime while school's not in session, and unfortunately, the tiles need not only to be removed, but there is asbestos tiles underneath those tiles, which means that when you lift those, and we've already had instances already, when you take the vinyl tile and you lift it, the asbestos tile is coming with it. And when that happens, you need an asbestos abatement. And that's a kind of an expensive process. It requires containment, and this thing has kind of, gotten to a point where it has reached a situation where we can't ignore it. There's tripping hazards, and you'll see that tiles are lifting and popping like all over the place. So our thought process, and we spoke with the school board last night, is to utilize the 2.5% contingency fund to perform one phase of this project, and we'll talk to you about the 300 and the 400 wings, and you'll see with your own eyes what we're talking about. In order to do that, it requires your consent as the budget committee, and it also requires the consent of the Commissioner of Education. So this is a kind of a tough process, and I know it's been done before because we had a drainage project here with some flooding issues, and we went through the same process. Randy and Dawn will give you more information after the tour about some of the costs and some of the processes that we're looking to proceed with in terms of asbestos vendors, state-approved, things like that. But our timeline is a little bit tough because we need to try to line somebody up within the next month because they need to come in here in the summertime. This is a lot of work. We also have to hire an outside help to help move furniture out of the way and to have them do this. So Randy and Dawn will get into the specifics, but the general overview and the reason why we're here tonight is for you to see with your own eyes and to feel with your own feet that these tiles are in really, really bad shape. So with that, Mike, if it's okay, I'll turn it over to Randy and Dawn, and they'll kind of lead you in a tour. And then the superintendent, Brian Bulkey, is here as well. I'll be here, Brian will be here. We can, we'll be going around, but you can ask any one of us any questions that you have with regard to the conditions. Tim went through it last night, and you'll see with your own eyes and feet that it's a problem. That's all I have.
Okay. So we...
We're ready to...
Sure.
Audio's back on. All right.
Okay. We're back from our tour, and our thanks to the GTV for following us around and being there. Thank you. Where do we go from here, and what other questions do people have or additional comments? Kelly?
Are you gonna walk through this, or?
Yeah, I'll have Randy, can kind of walk through that
Is there
for you, the technical aspects of, in terms of the square footage,
As you see, is when you, it's the room, the condition of the floor, or would be the tiles are, you know, they're curling, they're lifting, they're separating from the 9x9 tiles that are under them. Bare tiles have some curling with a little bit of damage, but they're really not separating yet. And then the good tile is, it may have some curling, a slight curling, or even a little bit of cracking in it, but that we can, again, maintain it with putting floor finish on. So we deem that as good as we walk through room by room. When if you're looking at the sheet, the way that it goes, I am looking at the 300 wing for an example. It's just the length, the width gives you the square footage, and then the total square footage. If you're looking down the total square footage, it tallies itself going down, so it's the 31.83 plus the 1085.
it's a running total.
It's a running total as you go down, and it just keeps adding to get to the number at the bottom.
And you have included these halls, and even if it's listed as good, you've included it in the dollars.
Because
in
we have to go around some of them.
Well, that's what I was,
Yes.
okay, just double checking,
Yes.
okay.
I jokingly mentioned carpet before, but even though I'm with you in terms of a full abatement, I do have the question, are there other flooring options that we've looked at that may be a flooring option that you actually like? I know within other commercial environments, they use other type of floating floor models or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, we had talked about a variety of products. We'd even talked about a total epoxy coating on the entire floors. We've done epoxy we did epoxy flooring in New Boston in a hallway and in the kitchen. That was something that we talked about. Could we possibly lay epoxy on top of? The problem for us really is when you have the asbestos containing 9x9 tiles underneath, the only way to properly adhere anything to that would be to create a rough surface. So if you had an abrasive type application that you could rough up the surface of the asbestos tile, then put new mastic and contain it, the problem is you can't rough that up.
Yeah.
So you start to create air disturbed, particulates that are obviously dangerous and hazardous.
We're not talking about installing something on top of, potentially, you're not talking
No,
about
but
installing on
that's
top of
part
the
of what-
9x9, or you're talking
That's
about
part of-
installing on the 12x12.
That's part of what we had talked about. Is there a way that we could remove the 12x12s, keep the 9x9s, and re-overlay so we didn't have to abate? So
Could
we explored
you-
that. We've explored an epoxy type coating. We have not, in full disclosure, we have not looked into carpet.
I would totally like that.
And I did, and I
Totally
actually,
opposed to carpet.
I mentioned it in one of our meetings, and there are so many issues
With
with
which,
regard to carpet.
It's just a cleanliness.
Clean, yeah.
You can't clean it, it's only good once when you put it down, it's never as good as when it goes down.
okay, this is
It deteriorates.
from a place of ignorance, what about like newer forms of floating floor that are designed literally to go over
Like a
old bad
laminate
flooring?
type product.
Yeah, obviously a commercial grade. I'm just wondering if that, especially hearing that we're not actually doing 100% abatement, right? Someday you might have to deal with 100% abatement if we're not moving the cabinets and all that. So you're not actually doing a full abatement. You're doing it because you have to do it for the sections that you're improving. What if you're using a product that's just wasn't around in 2002? As far as I understand, there are products on the market now that can literally go right on top of this. That would
Well,
potentially be high quality.
Laminate could, but then the issue is in terms of the durability of laminate and the maintenance that is required. You're talking about stuff that gets stuck on this is not.
I don't know. I don't know the question. I'm not the expert
This is
here.
a traffic area. Having worked in insurance claims and kind of dealing with this, I don't see that as even a prudent way to go.
Also, Peter, you're a landlord, you should do home repair. You can't put another floor on top of this. It would mess up all the door jambs. Doors wouldn't be able to close properly. You'd have to basically redo everything. That would end up being way too costly.
I forgot you're on the school board now. I mean, I'm not speaking from, I'm not speaking from being a school board, I'm just speaking from homeowner. I mean, if you just think about doing home repair DIY, I mean.
You just shave the bottom of the door
everything-
down.
Yeah, it's all possible. Again, I'm not an expert. I'll go as far as to say, I don't think we're all experts on flooring, here. We're all kind of walking around going, oh, this, and this. I'm not an expert. I'm just raising the question. I'm saying, is there stuff that we haven't thought about? Sometimes it's just possible. We haven't thought about something that didn't exist when we looked at this issue 20 years ago, right? And maybe today, you bring in a contractor, they're like, what are my options here? That's, I guess, knowing that we're talking about voting on this, you're kind of looking for us to approve this pretty quickly in order to be able to move forward, on our end at least. I'm
Wait,
just like,
hold
what if
on.
we had?
We're gonna talk about what the process is going forward.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Oh, I'm just saying that
Just
they
so we
have
some
mentioned that.
background when it happens, but it's coming at us.
Just maybe, I'm just bringing up, maybe there's a possibility that there's other options out there that we're not aware of. That's all.
But you're also talking about chemistry lab and other labs, right? So is there any requirements for those specific?
I don't know. I'm not an expert on
Right.
that.
So could you comment on what this will look like when you're all done, if this goes as planned? And you tear up everything, tear up the asbestos, tear up the stuff on top of it?
Yeah, Randy, you want to speak? to
What's
the
your
process?
finished
Yeah,
product
what's-
looking like? What do you put down so you
Yeah,
don't
what's
have a
this phase
problem?
one?
So again, it will be, abatement of the areas that we've defined, that we've walked through, that we have on the paper that they're in front of you. And it will be, they have a machine that will come in and with a bar that will go under, they'll skew a spot at the beginning and go through, and it just runs under the tiles and just lifts it.
Right.
And from that point, it's a chemical process that gets because the adhesive has asbestos in it as well. So that chemical process gets it, they literally scrape hands and knees and with scrapers, and they clean it up, and then the third-party person comes in and looks at it and does testing and says, yeah, you're right, you have removed it, and then they neutralize the floor to prep it for tile,
So what will you be putting down?
VCT.
Same tiles, same kind of tiles?
VCT, 12 by 12 VCT tiles.
And have you investigated that versus just doing a straight epoxy cover? Or there's not a concrete on grade, is it?
This is concrete.
Have you looked at that as an option? No tile, just going straight to epoxy? I'm only asking that because if you look at,
Cost-wise per square foot, it would be significantly higher. That
will
way.
it? Okay,
Yes.
yeah. Because I've noticed a lot of department stores are actually
Yes, they're
taking
doing
out
that.
tiles now, and they're doing that instead because they're taking out the asbestos and
Yeah.
putting down the
And I know that,
epoxy.
your point is
It
that-
wears unbelievably well compared to
So
tile.
The
It's in my
Keene
garage
School
right
District,
there.
as an example, has a different type of a floor tile that's not a VCT, that's
Yeah.
very durable, but
It's
it's also
epoxy.
2.5 times rubber.
Okay.
I didn't know if it's,
Great.
I assume that the cost may be higher for these things, but you're avoiding, I know you don't necessarily want to avoid the inevitable, but depending on how much that cost difference is for the actual abatement, right? Because you're not doing the abatement at that point. But, do you get what I'm saying? I'm saying, in this regard, let's say you're using a floor that can go over this. And I'm not saying lower quality, a good quality floor, let's say it's possible. If that cost is higher to do the floor, but still saves you a lot of money on the abatement,
The abatement is the abatement, you are not saving any money there because they have to remove the tile to put another tile, over, regardless of what you choose,
okay.
down on the concrete. So the abatement, that's
To
a
go down.
process, has to happen. Then what you're questioning is, what do you put over the top of it? Once it's up and the process has gone through, now you're ready.
Oh, no, to be
apply
clear,
the
my
floor.
question was very much specifically if you don't do abatement.
Right.
If you put something right on top.
A third floor.
Yeah, which sounds insane,
This
but
is
Just
what I'll
epoxy
share with
Then
over
you
it,
have
right?
weight issues.
But you will not have a contractor that will give you a warranty would be, it would not happen.
totally fine. You're just educating me.
Okay.
Mike,
Because there's so many damaged tiles there, how can you ask or expect anybody to warranty something that we know is already damaged and is living?
Cool.
if I could just put in a couple points here. Peter mentioned some spacing in between tiles, and I think where we're looking at this process was very rapid in how quickly these tiles seem to wear and tear compared to past years. Inspecting or just making sure that it's not a larger issue rather than just the asbestos tiles, that's not a structural issue, with the building or something like that. That's something that I think we should just think about and make sure. Also, on the Hillsborough County Executive Committee, so we're dealing with the women's prison, and there's asbestos in that building, and we're looking to demolish that building somewhat down the line. And what's been brought up is that if a fire were to happen in the building before we get the asbestos out of there, then you would, when you demolish the building, you have to treat the whole building like it's contaminated. And where we're talking about partial abatement in some of these places, especially in like these chemistry classrooms and stuff like that, that'd be also a concern that I would have if something were to happen. What we would have to end up doing to properly take care of that area as far as regulations and whatnot are concerned.
So this, I'm sorry, were you done?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Just wanted to make sure I wasn't interrupting. So this square footage is great. Do you guys have a written out proposal, or can you tell me when you will have a proposal for us about what the phases are, what those would impact, the cost associated with that? I mean, what's your timeline? What are you proposing?
The
This is
only
just
other
square
really
footage.
phase that we're looking at would be to do the same process in the 200 wing. And at this point, we haven't put together as much level of detail about that. We certainly could, in terms of square footage, the number of classrooms, go through the exact same exercise. And we haven't come up with a timeline for that. Again, we would hope that it would be in a year or two if we're able to get that far. But it's pretty considerably less square footage. So when we do a cost analysis of that, it'll be quite a bit less than what we're looking at here.
Is the plan to do all of these rooms listed here as well as the hallways, or are you selecting, say, everything that's in poor grade
So
or
what
anything that's
we've
in?
decided to recommend and what we've decided to do is to remove all the asbestos everywhere except for underneath where it's contained within the cabinetry. So we have asbestos floors. We didn't show you. We have 20-something classrooms that have asbestos floors with no overlay. Some of those are in decent condition because they last a long time because it has asbestos in it. What we're talking about doing is abating all of those classrooms. So in these two hallways, it would be absolutely everywhere with the exception of underneath the cabinets where there's electric and there's heating equipment. So all the classrooms where you either have just the 9x9 tiles or you have the overlay on top of them.
So, understanding, I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
that it's, for all intents and purposes, the end of March, and you want to get this done for this summer, do you have time to get this pulled?
Yeah, that's a great question.
That's a big one, I
And
think.
So what, over the last, several weeks, we have had conversations about, would we be able to get an approved vendor, not only the vendor who's going to abate the asbestos, but there also has to be an overseer, someone who watches that person to make sure that they're doing all the right protocols for safety. So Randy contacted the two state-approved vendors. One of them is the asbestos mitigator who removes it. The other one is the overseer, to see if they could possibly get us into their schedule for the summer months. Right now, we have a tentative, yes, we can do it. We wouldn't even be here if that were the case. We would just simply, we wouldn't be. So last night, we met with the school board. We walked them around as well. It is their intent to pursue this pending, that's why we're here with you. Our hope is that within about another week or so, maybe even less than that, give or take, that we'll have more definitive, right now, we gave you a ballpark of where this thing might land, but to get a more definitive number, and then we would hope to have an official vote by both bodies and then proceed. Not only does it require the school board's consent, it requires your consent. There's a public hearing that has to take place, and then the Commissioner of Education has to also sign off on it. So it is a process. We think it's a very doable process, but again, that's why I asked Mike if you could meet here. I thank you so much for
Pleasure
being
to support.
flexible, to do that.
Scott, what was the ballpark?
Right now, it was 425 to 450. We're trying to get, more definitive numbers. So it's always hard, if it comes in at 462, I don't want there to be a surprise. So we're trying to firm up those numbers, and Randy provided the gentleman with all of their square footage, so you can speak to that.
So the folks that is Peniel, I'm not sure if any of you have heard of them.
Peniel Environmental, right?
Yeah, environmental, that they deal exclusively in school districts, so they're very aware of the type of conditions that they're working on here. In fact, I had a phone conversation with their project manager that I should be getting a call from the person that would be here overseeing this project to come out, and we're hoping maybe we'll get him out on Friday, depending on what his schedule is, but Monday at the latest, to walk him through the building to see if the number that he gave the overseer, because they're connected together, so they have to work together, to see if the number that they provided to them, based on the square footage and the conditions that I explained to him, that his number matches what he gave them. Because the overseer's number is the number.
Right, and they look at a whole host of things in terms of, they have to, believe it or not, they have to do, containment. I believe they have to do showers and all that for their workers. This might be different.
This is a non-friable
Non-friable.
material.
But typically when these type of vendors come in, they have to cordon off areas. They look for egress and,
But they have to do
all those
containment
things.
here.
Containment, so they have to think physically looking at it. So I think within a week and a half, we should have a much firmer number.
And do they do the disposal too? Is that included?
Yes.
Okay.
So
With all
just,
the, that's, again, the third party comes in on that
Okay.
to make sure that when it leaves here, that it actually goes to the proper facility. And then there's documentation that's passed back and
Okay.
forth, and then that's given back to us.
Okay.
so if I got it right, for what we need to do is reconvene for an open hearing and a vote, and that would be to support, that would be, you'd bring forward what's going forward to the Department of Education for the state.
Right.
And that would be what the hearing would be about, public comment, ourselves to,
Right, because we have to give
act on
public
it.
notice. That's a time requirement for that.
so
Can
I
the,
guess we'll wait on your schedule and tell us when that's gonna be.
Right. It-
and-
Yes.
can the hearing be before the vote? That was my question.
The
Can the
hearing has to
hearing-
be before the vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you
Yes.
needed approval to go to
No.
a hearing. Okay.
So process-wise, school board is a nod.
School board last
The
night.
school board has made a motion to authorize administration to continue to pursue this process. So they've directed us to start lining up the different steps, to start planning for the public hearing, to make the request of the budget committee. I guess if I could be so bold respectfully, we can't do this without your support, your collective support. So I think for us, we would be interested in knowing if there's a general consensus of supporting this project. If there isn't, then we would likely stop the process altogether, because this project, this process doesn't go forward without the permission, the vote of the budget committee. So like the last time we used this money for the high school drainage project, we actually did that meeting as a concurrent meeting of both boards. And then the last step is we have to have approval by the commission.
Okay, I guess what I'm looking to you folks for then is to put together what the timeline, or do you need something from us tonight?
I think whether it be an unofficial or a straw vote, something that would give us a way forward, because the school board gave us that way forward. Proceed with the steps that are necessary. We would ask for you to take the same vote to proceed with the steps necessary to get final numbers and to, post meetings and things of that nature. That would give us the public support, or the official support, I should say, that we're going in the right direction. Without that,
Let me ask Tim to give us a motion similar to what was there on the floor.
Do you mind, before we motion, can I just ask, were you planning on using the $100,000 in the capital reserve fund to help pay for this project?
no.
Okay.
That was not brought up by the school board.
So the fund that was put in place to replace existing
Right. So as you-
infrastructure, is not being used to replace existing infrastructure.
So-
If I want to be clear.
So the, what we have before us is approval of the capital reserve fund. If there are unassigned fund balances in excess of 200,000, then 200,000 will get deposited. Of that 200,000, this committee asked that we focus on 3 projects, so we are committed to those 3 projects. There would be $100,000 that will remain in the capital reserve fund. Right now, the board did not have any discussions about utilizing $100,000 of that fund for this project. If you want us to have that conversation with them, we can have that conversation with them.
I just think the whole reason why we approved that fund was so that we could use it if we needed it before we tapped into the emergency fund. So I would argue that we shouldn't go forward until the school board says, yes, we're going to use that $100,000 from the fund, and then the rest will come from emergency funding.
I respectfully, I understand, I respect your opinion. We don't have the time. For that. And
ultimately,
at the end, in my humble opinion, the monies are gonna all end up going in the same place. And I say that because your contingency fund is based upon unassigned fund balance at the end of the year. And any monies that are left over, the board can authorize monies to go into that fund, into the 2.5% contingency fund, and to go into the capital reserve fund. So whether or not we paid $100,000 out of the capital reserve fund or use the contingency, it's all for the most part the same. And for $100,000, and given the time frame and the time crunch that we're under, I would just respectfully request that you give us a little bit of leniency.
Well,
on that
so
one.
the $100,000 I'm talking about was $100,000 the taxpayers said we can use to replace existing infrastructure.
Right,
So when we're not doing what the taxpayers just voted in a couple weeks ago, that puts us in a poor position
My argument,
with the voters.
Joe, my argument there would be, we know we have a phase 2, and let's talk about using that $100,000. And again, I don't speak for the board, but my argument to my conversation with the board would be, then use that $100,000 towards phase 2, because we know that one's coming. And that would be within the spirit of what you're talking about.
Right, and hopefully next year, the voters then approve another $200,000
Right.
for this fund to use it on phase 2.
Right, and I
But
think
what
that
I'm
would be in
saying
the
is
spirit of
phase
what you're
1,
saying.
what we're talking about is like, we need to throw that money that we specifically put towards doing things like this, we need to, in good faith to the taxpayers, put it towards that. And
Joe, I as the new guy, sort of last night, also having the experience from this board, that was something that I said as well in terms of being transparent. I brought up to the board that with the CRF, what I understand, and I personally did vote in favor of using the 2.5%, but I do also understand that this committee is also looking for transparency on that 100,000. And to the point that I brought up, and that I would also, as the rep, bring back to them, and I can sense where you're coming from with this, is basically sort of a timeline. What would we like to do with the 100,000 in the future? Because that money is going to get spent, be it with phase 2, which is what Scott's saying, or for any of the other numerous projects the school system has. That money isn't going to just sit there. We have goals with that money.
what I'm saying with the phase 2 is we've heard that it's going to be another year before we're even going to think about phase 2. So if
Okay.
that's the case, voters vote every March. So if that's the case and they want another $200,000 in this capital reserve fund, I'm talking about the $100,000 we're spending
Right.
this year.
Right. and
This
that's-
year isn't going to be phase 2. This year's phase 1.
So that
why are
money,
we spending it on phase 1?
because that money can either get, to Scott's point, can either get carried over to phase 2, or to what I was saying, the school system has any number of projects that we can use that money for. And that's what that money has been put aside for.
I just want a point of clarity. So the $100,000 we're talking about
It's the
is not
difference
money that
between-
actually we know exists.
No,
It's-
it does
It does
exist.
exist.
It's the
Does
difference, the
exist.
$200,000 CRF, which was like Article 4 or whatever. 100,000, this board already knows is getting spent from last hearing. It's going to, Scott, help me out, it's going to lockers.
But the CRF is not being, we're not raising taxes to fund the CRF. The CRF is funded
That
from
CRF
whatever they have left
deposit
over.
will be deposited on July 1st with the trustees of the trust fund, provided there's a fund balance at the end of the year, which we anticipate.
So technically, right now, in one aspect, we're talking about can they spend it out of their actual general budget, right? Because that's, right now, it's in your general budget. If you guys don't have the money left over at the end of the year, you don't have that money to put into your CRF.
That's true. The school board did not look to us to see if we could potentially fund a portion or portions of this project using current budget funds.
Yeah.
They went to the 2.5% contingency fund because, to Joe's point, the community authorized the creation of that fund for the purpose of emergency expenditures, which we feel this is within that scope.
The 2.5% you're talking
Yes.
about. You're not talking about the new CRF, you're talking about the 2.5%.
Yes.
Really quickly, is the 2.5% fully funded right now? Are we?
So yeah, I'll give you a little bit of background on that. So the 2.5% contingency fund is based upon the prior year's net school assessment. It's a DRA term. When we had that $10 million situation,
I don't know what you're talking about.
the return,
Yeah, go.
okay? So the net assess, so our current year, we have about $617,000 in the 2.5% contingency fund right now.
Okay.
As of July 1, we will be able to deposit, I think it's about $391,000. The reason being is that because we returned that 10 million, our net assessment went down considerably, and therefore you can't keep as much in that fund.
Right,
So you'll
is
have
that
just
the
over $1 million
6%?
bucks in
I'm sorry?
You'll have just over $1 million bucks in July.
No.
Oh, you're giving,
What I'm trying to say is
Oh.
that 2.5% contingency fund lapses every single year, does not accrue, all right? So there's 615 or something $1,000 in it right now. If nothing gets spent, it all goes back to tax relief, or the board can say, can put it towards the 2.5% contingency fund for the following year, but only up to that 300 and.
so what if we did something like, just kind of piggybacking off of Joe, I'm just going to, because you guys are asking not for us to support it tonight, but we want to move fast. Your 81% of it was Port Fair on the 400 wings. Or the 300 wings, sorry. Yeah, Port Fair. We all agree, probably money-wise, it's better to do the whole job together than to have it piecemeal. But what if we talked about saying, okay, ask for that 69%/81% out of your 2.5% fund, and the rest of it, just figure out how to pay for it. Use your operating budget.
Let me offer another thought here. I think we're not all clear with, here's the numbers, here's where it's coming from, here's where it's going to. Could that be part of the next step that you bring forward, please? And this is what we got in the fund.
I can clarify that.
If you
So,
could do that.
I can do it right now.
Can I whiteboard it?
And
Yes,
Mike,
if you'd like.
what I know we are clear about is that we should be using that $100,000. And I think, and you can feel free to disagree with me, but I am clear that that $100,000 needs to be used. So however the school board can have a meeting and give us that $100,000 to devote that towards this project, then I'd be willing to support something like this. But until then, we're not using money that we devoted to use money to fix problems.
Mike, if
And
I
we don't
could
have
have
to
a
vote on
moment.
that, Joe.
To be clear, that capital reserve fund does not currently exist until July 1, correct? And we're talking about dealing with money before
June
July
30th.
1.
Right.
But Cole, they have the
And
money.
Our,
No, right,
No,
look,
they
We're
don't.
not gonna pay all that money.
look.
We're not gonna pay for the project.
there's a
They have the money
contingency
because
fund
if
that's
they don't
set
have
up
the money,
to
they're not
deal
gonna have it.
with emergencies.
We are going to get the money back in revenue, in revenue that we expected to get back. So we have the money already, because it's bottom line budget.
Joe, but they are gonna be, so in May, when they present us with other projects that need to be done on the schools, we can definitely find something, just,
What's
to
wrong with going
fix.
through CIP though, like the process?
It's an
Yes,
emergency.
it will
That's
be
the
a
problem with
CIP.
going through CIP. That's why
Well,
they're
if we
bringing this
can't,
up now and
We do
not
have a
waiting.
choice to fund it differently. I think Joe raises that point. It isn't entirely possible that they can take some money from the 2.5% contingency fund and other parts of the money, they can use the operating budget. Because if we're going to have a CRF that's funded in July, then we're working off the assumption that they have extra money. They're going to have extra money in this budget to put towards that. So whether it's $100,000 extra or what, we're saying there is some extra money here.
Brian, can I ask you a question, please? Can you maybe for us define what would constitute this as an emergency in the way that you would present it to the public? Maybe that would.
Sure. Well, essentially what we would say is we've had a rapid deterioration of the quality of the flooring. And at this point, we have asbestos tiles that have become exposed. They have become more significantly disrupted. We're not able to properly contain and encapsulate the asbestos anymore. In addition to trip hazards, we don't want to have continued deterioration, which in the future we would expect that the continued deterioration would make the problem worse.
If I may too, the statute with regard to the contingency fund, okay, it doesn't use the word emergency. It says, and I have a couple of copies here, a school district annually by an article separate from the budget and all other articles in the warrant or the governing body of the city upon recommendation of the school board when in the operation of schools is by a department of the city may establish a contingency fund to meet the cost of unanticipated expenses that may arise during the year. A detailed report of all expenditures from the contingency fund shall be made annually by the school board and published with their report. So it doesn't specifically state emergency. There's another statute which talks about emergencies, but the contingency fund itself is established for unanticipated expenses, and so it's kind of a combination of both. And I think that clearly this for us was an unanticipated expense. And like I said, I think I guess I respectfully request not to split hairs on some of this. We are kind of on crunch time, and I get the whole 100,000. I do. I don't disagree with it. I just think that in the spirit of that capital reserve fund to replace existing assets, we are already met that spirit by we're going to be doing those other 3 projects. For the next $100,000, Tim is on the school board. He has articulated, he has said that he wants to earmark where that's coming from. By all intents and purposes, we kind of know it's going to go towards phase 2 of this project.
So can
There's no lack of transparency there. So to take money from an existing budget, I just think we're being pretty upfront in telling you that, we wish this thing didn't, happen so quickly, but by the same token, we're trying to be, as upfront, as honest as possible.
So can I then just summarize in, I think maybe as a committee, we could say that we're supporting the school board in coming up with a proposal and having their hearing, and that we're going to ask the school board to look at possible funding options. If they have their hearing and we're not on board with what happens, the vote from the budget committee is after that. So, I mean, there are possible options. We can put that forward and they could say, we can't do it that way. I mean, is that kind of what you guys are aligning? Or are you looking for us to say,
So what
run with
we
it?
need.
Because we don't even have an official number. It's very hard to do
I
that.
understand
Or
that.
project plan.
What we're looking for is the support of the concept of using the 2.5% contingency fund. And I would say that irrespective of what the particular dollar amounts are. So if we're looking at a project that's $450,000, and if we were to fund it with $100,000 from the capital reserve fund, as Joe suggested, $100,000 of leftover money from this current year's budget, and then a portion of the remaining money, we would still need your support. So whether we're looking for the whole 450 out of the 2.5% fund, or we're only looking for 50,000 out of the 2.5% fund, we would need the budget committee's vote either way. So we could certainly go back to the board, let us take the feedback to possibly look at maybe, is it fair to call it almost like a blended funding type approach? But even any money that would be used out of the 2.5% fund, we need a vote from the budget committee. So whether it's the whole amount or it's just a slice of it.
I mean, I would say it's difficult to request, and I 1000% agree with what you're saying, and I hear you, but off hypothetical money. And in that instance, my bigger concern is the fact that we have asbestos in this school, and that's a huge issue. Potential lawsuits, there's lots of bad things that could happen. So I mean, I would like the school board to think about that in doing it, but I don't
think I'm
think
with you,
that's.
Kelly. I think, and Joe as well. But my thought was, what it sounds like you need from us is a support to go ahead and bring the process forward, not an approval of, yes, it's okay.
Right, but here's the other thing too, and I had to, in terms of with just dealing with budgets, is that if this board does a straw vote and the majority of you are comfortable with spending up to $450,000 from that's what I would ask you to do, is to take a straw vote. How many would be in favor of spending up to $450 using the contingency, using $450,000 from the contingency fund?
This is
And
from
then-
the 615.
Of the 615, using 450 of it. And if there's not a consensus on that, then if there's the second consensus of spend $350 from the contingency fund and use the other $100,000 from the capital reserve fund, at least I can go back to the school board and they can take action and this thing can go. Going back and forth and trying to negotiate is extremely challenging. I would hope, one, that you would support it and that you would support it at the 450 level. But if you didn't, then at least Tim can go back to the school board. We can go back to the school board and say, listen, they're only supporting $350 from the contingency fund. The other 100 has to come from the CRF that was just approved. And I'm not saying that's god awful, but at least it gives the school board two things to think about.
Well, I would think we support it, but I do support Joe, because I think we're missing out on kind of an ironic thing for you, Brian. You're working for a reserve fund for 6 years. Now you have something there, and you don't want to use it. I just find this kind of comical.
I want
let
to
me,
use it, Carl. I just want to use it for the next phase. But I would fully support Joe's idea that if the budget committee wanted to see 100,000 of that come out of the capital reserve fund, this project's important to us, and really, I'm okay with that. Scott may disagree with me.
I only disagree with you because of the sense that I know we're gonna have a phase 2, and I know that we're gonna dip into that $100,000, so we might as well get phase 1 with this 450, and that's the only reason why, because I know another one is coming. If I didn't have another phase, I would be with Joe on this.
That 450, what's sitting up there on the board is also a use it or lose it conversation.
There's a couple $100,000 that is use it or lose it.
Right, but the reality of it is if you don't use the 450, you're not gonna get that money back. Whereas if you lose the 100, it's gone.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
I mean, it's some portion of that is going to disappear on July 1st if we haven't used it.
Correct.
Right.
It's not disappearing, though.
Well, it's going back to the
Yeah, it's
taxpayers, to
going
be
back.
clear.
It's going
It's
back.
not
Right,
disappearing
Right, it's
anyway.
tax relief, but it's kind of like, when you haven't seen it, you don't know that you didn't have it. And the reality of it is there was a situation that warrants it.
So Scott, we've been bouncing around the timeline a lot, just for clarity for everyone as well as the new folks on the board here. We're looking to essentially, what we're coming here tonight was to get the straw poll from the budget committee for us to then, like we discussed last night, go through and have a public hearing. Is everyone's on the same?
Why don't we go
Committee.
individually?
Right, I think it would be nice to know where everybody stands on either the 450 or 350 with the use of a capital reserve fund. That would at least give us a good indication of where you are in terms of your numbers. And then we can at least go back to the board and they kind of know what they're faced with. And I'm not saying that, that would just help us incredibly. So it sounds like there is general support, it's just a matter of which approach. Is that fair enough to say?
Well, let's
Yeah.
Make a
let's
motion.
test that. Have a
I think we
motion
want to
for-
see, additional funding mechanisms, and I think using the capital reserve fund is one of those funding mechanisms, but I want to see like a full, kind of layout of what all of our options are, not just the one I laid out today, but all of them, and see what we can figure out from there.
And that's where it gets complicated, because
Right.
with all due respect, that's where we don't have the time. And I am comfortable with using 100,000 from the CRF, because I understand I understand that argument, but going back and forth, I think this is the board be bidding against itself. I don't think that's a.
Let me tell you, let's get at least a motion about do we support going forward with the project. Forget about how it's
Right.
funded. No.
Mike, can I just add one thing before you do? And I'll say the 450 number isn't a number that's just pulled out of the air.
Right. No,
That's a number
that's
from
your best guess.
contractors based on the square footage and just vetting when they come in, that the number that they gave was accurate.
Right, got it.
With, of
We
course,
couldn't- We couldn't get them on site. Randy went and met with them
Sure.
on
Number
site.
might be lower, but.
Right.
or it might be a little bit
Could be a
higher.
little bit,
Right.
but not-
We don't want to lock ourselves
Right.
in.
Yeah.
Tim, you want to give us a motion about this support?
Sure.
We'll deal with how we support it, we'll get everybody's straw on that.
I would like to
Is
make
this an
a,
official motion? This is not.
This is an official motion. Does the board support going forward with the process? Does not mean that we say, yay, this is okay, because we don't have everything in front of us yet.
Okay.
Is that all right, Joe?
To push them to do the hearing and
Yes,
so on.
to proceed with the hearing.
And our
and-
official
and
vote will
details.
be after that.
Tim is going to make the exact same motion that he made yesterday. Well, I can't quote myself like that exactly. I don't remember that well, Peter, but I have something that touches all bases. So everyone lynch me if I get this wrong. I support the school board's decision, or I would like to make a motion to support the school board's decision to pursue an investigative quoting process utilizing the 2.5% contingency fund and public hearing with the expectation that the SAU will return to budget committee with the formal numbers and costs upon receiving them for then additional actual budget approval.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have all but 1, 2, 3, 4 nays, I guess?
Well, hold on. Yeah, no, I'm opposed.
Yeah, okay, all right, opposed, how many opposed? 4 opposed, and abstentions? Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, how many of us are there? I'm losing it here tonight, sorry, 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So we have
9-13.
9 in favor and 4 opposed.
Okay.
All right. Now, we should do a straw vote for
Match.
either doing totally out of the,
Mike, if I could, I think it would be most helpful if everyone just went around and said where they were
okay,
on
let's do that.
funding. I think that makes more sense
Yeah, that's where I was heading to.
if we're informal. Yeah.
Carl, where you at?
I'm supporting the capital reserve fund, part of it, with other.
Okay, Bill? Likewise.
Likewise.
Okay,
Excuse me, 100,000 of the capital reserve fund or 200,000? Because
don't
we've
have
already
200,000.
earmarked, what?
You don't have
No, he's saying 100.
100, okay, all right, okay.
Cole?
I'd prefer to use the money from the capital reserve fund for phase 2. I feel that the capital reserve fund was for projects that we kind of see that are on the horizon, and the contingency fund would be the best use to take care of the emergency that we just toured and we can't ignore.
Hey, Rich?
I would be in favor of using the capital reserve fund for phase 1. I believe it would spread the cost out in a little bit more of a business sense, more effectively. And this is what we approved the capital reserve fund for. I'm sure next time around, the SAU is going to come back asking for more at the next town meeting. So at this point, we don't want to just keep piling funds into that capital reserve fund. We want to use it for its stated purpose.
Spencer?
I'd say the same. I think we should also use the capital reserve fund in conjunction with other methods of funding.
Tim?
I feel like in regards to the issues that we have here, I mean, I understand where we're coming from in terms of wanting to use the money to go back for tax relief, but at the same time, we have, ultimately individuals' health at stake. Asbestos, as we all know, is a chemical that causes cancer, that has other health implications for the school district. And
I mean, we live in America where for the last 60 years, that's all we had used, and now we're sort of at the tail end where we're trying to get out of that. So it's going to be costly, and then there's going to be struggles and growing pains, but ultimately, for us to continue to have a successful school system, we need to push forward into that future one way or another.
So where are you on the spending part of this?
Well, I mean, I made the motion to use the whole 2.5%.
All right, so that's what you.
Yes.
For using the 2.5%, just because the capital reserve fund, I see it as something that's pre-planned, maybe going towards relief of the CIP. And this is an emergency, so I would use the 2.5% and fix it.
Okay. And I'm on board with the emergency fund. Peter?
I feel like I'm playing poker here. I believe, I love you guys, I believe you guys will find a way to pay for it if this board said 50% from your 2.5% contingency fund. I believe you would. So I'm going to say half. We'll do more down the line.
Eileen?
I would say you take the 450, you leave the 100 reserved in the capital reserve fund because you haven't even started the year and you don't know what else could hit you in the face of emergencies.
Jeff?
I agree with you on that one. I think that puts you in a situation where you might be a little.
You're starting in a hole before we even start the school year.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd probably look to prioritize a lot of these and take the kind of poor and fair and do 100% abatement. If you're going to abate a classroom, I wouldn't leave additional asbestos, especially if we're talking about, safety and so forth. Just get rid of it all if you're going to do a classroom. But to echo what Peter says, I think you guys will find a way to fund it, whether it's from the 2.5 or part of the capital reserve fund. Either way, I think it's something that needs to be done.
Joe?
I see this as something that needs to be done, but I also see the implications of not using the capital reserve fund as a huge issue. That needs to be used. The 100,000 that we have not earmarked needs to be used. Additionally, I agree with Peter in the sense of there could be somewhere in the budget we could find additional funding options, and I want to see all the options. And I understand we're rushed, but this money, this $615,000 is taxpayer money at the end of the year, and I want to see us doing whatever we can to give them as much back as we can.
Kelly?
I'm still thinking,
Okay.
but I do have a question. Would you, for this year's CIP, put the second phase into
Yes.
the actual full CIP process completely? So why would we be concerned about hanging on to that money if you're looking to appropriate more for that CIP project?
You've lost me in the question.
So if you're gonna put it into CIP for whatever the cost of the second phase is, what's the purpose of holding on to the money in anticipation of that getting
Yeah, so that you have $100,000 in your CRF, so that next year, let's say you had a $300,000 abatement program, you'd say, we'd like to have this, you'd have it as a warrant article, $100,000 coming out of the CRF and $200,000 to deal with it.
What
That's
happens
the
if your
reason,
sewer
is
system
you know
goes?
that it's there. It's I guess that's my opinion on it, is that we know where the money is where this CRF money is gonna go. This project is critically important to phase 1 and 2. So as far as I'm concerned, you might as well keep that $100,000 for that one, because using the emergency fund will not be an option at that point. It's not an emergency because you're planning for it, so you won't be able to use your emergency fund there.
If I may, Mike, I appreciate the thoughtful dialogue. I think you all have really good ideas, and at the end of the day, I think you all recognize that we have a situation that needs to be addressed, and we're just talking about a couple of different pathways up the mountain of how to do that. What I'd like to do, Joe, and all of you who were thinking sort of along the lines of using the capital reserve fund, let us come back with a couple of options and look at a couple of different scenarios for how we could pay for the whole project. and look at, get the numbers as tight as we can. Randy's gonna do that, and then come back with a couple of options of how to look at it. But what I'm leaving here with is we're gonna continue on with the process of going through the utilization of some portion of the 2.5% contingency fund, which has statutory requirements for us to go about having a hearing, having appropriate postings, and those types of steps. So we're gonna continue to move forward with that. But I think what we'll come back to the school board with and discuss at the public hearing is, here's one, we already know what they are, right? It's one option is gonna be used, all the funds come from the 2.5% contingency fund. Option number 2 is some portion comes from the 2.5% contingency fund, and then 100,000 comes from the capital reserve fund, and there could be a third option. So let us come up with a couple of different scenarios. At this point, we'll still continue to move forward. Thank you for your support on this, and we do apologize that this is kind of last minute. It seems kind of rushed, but really, I think for us, if we're right at the window that at this point, we could still potentially do this project this summer. If we didn't have that option, we wouldn't be trying to expedite this. We'd be putting epoxy down, we'd be sticking things as best we can, we'd be layering on the floor wax, and just continue to get through. But at this point, we can do this project this summer. Let us come up with a couple of scenarios to give you a look of some alternative ways to pay for it.
And thank you so much for coming here and
Thank you.
all of your discussion. It means a lot.
No, thank you. Right now, we're looking at April 16th as our next meeting, but it sounds like you may want us together earlier than that. So I'm going to look to you folks to let us know, let me know, and let Catherine know, and we'll get...
Let us see, Mike, if we could work our process around leaving the 16th as your meeting. And the school board has the pieces that they have to do. We have to have the public hearing and those pieces. But if we can work within that time frame, we will. But if we needed to look at an alternative date, I appreciate your flexibility.
Yeah, we'll go earlier if you need us earlier.
Beautiful.
So
And the
just
same thing, if we get
let us know.
information, we'll get that out to you, obviously, as soon as we get it.
That'd be great.
And if anyone has any questions between now and then, please feel free to reach out to me directly, to Scott, or to Randy, and we'll try to get you any information that anyone needs.
Whatever we get, we'll have Catherine send out to everybody for you, so everybody will have the same information to work with. I think that's all I
Yeah,
had.
I want to say thanks. Thank you so much again.
Mike, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Seconded. Oh, do we have
Do we have a town update?
town update? Oh,
Do you-
sorry.
Sorry, do you have anything?
There's a motion on the floor.
Do we have anything new from the
There's
town?
no-
that we haven't-
Right, yeah.
Well, I didn't
you get a
prepare
vote.
anything because I didn't realize.
Okay.
You could say no.
We had some
We're
elections.
all fine when you
Yeah.
say no.
Everything passed, so I'm sure departments are gonna start spending their money and then, and building their budgets for next year with that. I mean, that's what is
I
happening
know, I just
now.
thought, I thought the phrasing was funny.
So no, that's it for
All
now.
right, thank
I'll
you.
be better prepared for next time.
That's fine, no problem.
Who won the elections, for the record?
I'm sorry?
Who won the
No.
elections?
It's on www.goffstown.gov. No.
Chet Boyer
Is
and...
it? My email address is .gov, I don't know.
Chet Boyer,
Bowen.
Oh, and not Boyer.
Chet Bowen.
I forget.
Chet Bowen and Collis.
I thought you were asking overall, I'm like, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I meant for the select board.
Selectmen?
Sorry, I should clarify.
Motion to adjourn.
We have one last thing for you to think about over the next month or so. We are going to need a representative of the CIP committee, from the budget committee. So we're looking for any volunteers at the next meeting. And we all adjourned?
Yes.
Yes.
Yay. Second, third.
We're doing.